Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast is number 1404. The topic is nutrition, and the title is, Will Eating More Protein Lead to More Muscle? Ooh, fun question. Not always a fun answer, because I'm a jerk and I never give you guys like, yes, always, or no, never, because it's almost... Well, it's never the case, or it's always the case. The problem is there's always a maybe, and that's the answer. So, will eating more protein lead to more muscle? The answer is maybe. So what I want to do is explain when would the answer be yes, and when would the answer be no, and then how you can know what you should do. So, when would the answer be yes? Well, if you have more muscle damage than you have incoming protein, meaning you have more muscle damage present than to match the amount of protein you're eating, so you're under eating your protein compared to your muscle damage, then adding more protein, yes, it should add to more muscle. So if you train consistently, but you don't eat consistently, then adding more protein and being more consistent can lead to more muscle, and it probably will. So an example of this is one of my clients is a personal trainer. She trains 4 to 5 times per week, which was consistent, but her food was ridiculously, wildly inconsistent. So calories were chronically low, with some random high days here and there, maybe once a week, if that. And then protein was chronically low with no high days, ever. So she felt skinny fat, wasn't very strong, didn't have great aerobic endurance, kind of didn't look and it didn't feel like a trainer. So when she reached out, she's like, help me. And I was like, okay, sure, I got you. So we talked through all this stuff, and we found that out. She was under eating in both calories and protein compared to her activity. And we talked through, she had a history of restrictive eating, different styles of diets. And, when she was younger, she felt like she was judged for having kind of a more athletic frame. So she tried not to eat a lot when she was young in school because she felt like she would get teased all the time. And it's like, oh man, that stinks, because that messes you up for life. And it's something that, like, thankfully we've been able to change and make some changes for it, but that stuff does carry with you. So what she found was she would skip breakfast. She thought, the longer she could go through the day without eating, the more fat she would lose. So she thought it was, the best thing was to avoid food. And then when she did eat, she would eat just little snacks here and there. She thought of food as harmful to her goals. So what we had to change was to learn that food is our friend. Food is our friend. We had to learn what food does for us, why we need it, and when we need it, and what types we need, and just kind of learn all the benefits and good things that food can help us do when it comes to changing our body. So now that she's been more consistent with calories, she's been more consistent with protein, she's leaner, and she has more muscle, visible muscles. She looks good. So now she's looking better, feeling better. She's now fired up and teaching her clients about nutrition, and it's helping her business. Her business has grown now that she's looking better and kind of feeling more motivated, and probably out there being, better networking and all those things. And her clients are getting better results, and they tend to be, she's reported that they're happier because they're now seeing and feeling benefits that they didn't see and feel before. So if you create muscle damage by training, but you don't eat enough protein consistently, then increasing protein will lead to more muscle. Yes, so the answer would be yes. Now, how much is enough? Well, we know, we've talked about this before, is the kind of appropriate range, the general range you would give people is to eat 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of lean body weight. So how much you would weigh if you think you're walking around the beach with a six-pack? That body weight, you'd want to eat 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of that body weight. And then in extreme cases where somebody's training 5, 6, even 7 days a week, and it's heavy duty, big muscle damage training, like bodybuilding style training, 5, 6, 7 days a week, they might want to go up to 1.25 grams per pound. Now, I've talked about this before, but I have done diets myself where I ate 2 grams per pound. I grew up back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, where when you read like bodybuilding magazines back then, they would tell you 2 grams per pound of body weight. Well, they were also selling you protein powders, jerk faces. So they basically just lied to us because that is unnecessary. You do not need that much protein. So it's just very annoying that I spent my childhood eating everything under the sun I could possibly get, and I could basically was under eating carbs and fats because so many of my calories were controlled by protein, and then I just felt like low energy. You're trying to suffer through, pounds of boiled chicken because I didn't know how to cook. So if you've ever eaten boiled chicken, I feel bad for you, and then you should in turn feel bad for me because I did it too. Ugh, gross. But you don't need that much. So 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of lean body weight is good for most people. If you train pretty vigorously, you can do 1.25 grams per pound, and that works pretty well as well. Now, that's when the answer would be yes. So again, the question is, will eating more protein lead to more muscle? When would the answer be no? Ooh. Well, if there's a lack of unfulfilled muscle damage. What in the heck does that mean? It means the person trains consistently, but they don't really produce a lot of damage in what they do. Now, there's various examples of that. Some would be like circuit style training. If you do like group classes and you do kind of like a lot of movements where you stand in place or use very light weights, say 20 pounds or less. Your muscles are probably burning, your lungs are burning, you're sweating a lot, but there's not really going to be a lot of muscle damage. If somebody goes for walks and they're like, well, I exercise, I go for walks 4 times a week. Well, that doesn't really create a lot of muscle damage. It's good, for healthy digestion, good blood work, like blood value improvements. There's a lot of other odds and ends that's good for it, but it doesn't create a lot of muscle damage. And then also, if somebody comes in and if they come into the gym and maybe they have a technique-based day where they, squat, bench, and deadlift, but they never go over 70% of their weights. Not really going to produce a lot of muscle damage there. It's just you're coming in and you're practicing movements. You're not really creating muscle damage. So there are training styles that don't really produce a lot of muscle damage. And in those cases, eating more protein won't help because the protein doesn't have anywhere to go. There's nothing for it to do. Protein repairs and builds damaged structures. If you don't have any damage, what the hell does it have to do? So eating more protein isn't going to help. Now, you might say, well, how do I know if I have enough damage? How do I know if I have the right amount of muscle damage? Well, in general, you can train each body part twice per week if you're going for maximal damage. So training each body part twice a week is an appropriate kind of frequency. You can do 10 to 20 working sets of 20 to 60 seconds of good form failure or near failure. You stop maybe a few reps short. So some of my clients might notice that we train their body parts 3 or 4 times a week, but I lessen the number of working sets per body part per workout to where it still equates out to 10 to 20 sets per week, 10 to 20 working sets. So there's ways to modify this. I do a lot of kind of variations to the rules because individuals need different things for different schedules and different needs. So if you have lower strength levels, you're going to need more working sets to create the muscle damage that somebody who's very strong. If somebody's very strong, they don't need as many working sets to create damage because they're so damn strong. So strength levels impact how frequent and how many working sets you would train for muscles. So there's a lot of variations, like that 20 to 60 seconds of time under tension. That's a huge range. The stronger somebody is, the less likely they need to be, the less often they need to be in the lower end of that range. The weaker somebody is, the more often they need to be in the lower end of that range. So there's a lot of variations you have within this, kind of guidelines. But in general, each muscle can be trained twice a week. You should train it for 10 to 20 working sets, and the working sets should be 20 to 60 seconds of kind of a maximal effort where it's good form failure, not that you're just going to total failure where the movement looks like crap by the end of it. It should be good form failure or, like 1, 2, maybe 3 reps short of failure, but it should be pretty damn close to failure. Now, if you're not doing that, you're not maximizing your muscle damage. Therefore, maximizing your protein won't have much of an effect. And unfortunately, eating more protein can actually be detrimental. It can cause increased fat, body fat, because if you increase protein, you might be inadvertently increasing carbon fat intake as well, because, there's not many protein sources that are void of all carbs and fats, where it's truly just protein. But even if you control calories and you increase your percent of calories contributable by protein, if you increase it too much, it can actually lead to low energy. It can lead to cravings. It can reduce your metabolism. Your body will actually allocate less calories towards non-essential processes, which means you burn less calories per day. And it will actually reduce fat loss because it increases the priority placed on existing body fat. So increasing protein when you don't have the environment for it can actually be very detrimental. It can actually set you back. No increase in muscle, but actually increase body fat now and increase body fat later because of the reduced metabolism. So there is negative consequences to increasing protein when you don't have a need for it. Now, how do we find that balance? That's a kind of a great question. It's a good thing I thought of it. Now, what we'd want to think of is if I'm not very active, meaning I don't work out, or what I do doesn't create a lot of muscle damage, maybe it's just going for walks, then the lowest end of that range is probably going to be a good place for you to be. Maybe 0.6 grams per pound. You can play with trying to go up to 0.7 to 0.8, see if it makes any difference, see if it makes you feel better. If you feel like, oh man, my weight kind of went up a little bit, I feel kind of pudgy, bring it back down to 0.6. Now, if you do kind of medium intensity training, maybe you do some group classes, you're up and active, you're moving around, but you don't really move a lot of weighted things. You just kind of move your body around a little bit. But it's not like plyometrics and craziness. It's just, I'm up and moving, I'm moving some things that are under 20 pounds. I feel active, but nothing is super heavy. Nothing really beats up my muscles. It makes me feel sore. I breathe a lot, sweat a lot. But it's not like a bodybuilder would train. Well, then you probably only need in the middle of the range, maybe 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 at most. But then you have people, okay, I lift weights 3, 4, 5 days a week consistent. I lift near failure. I do everything you tell me I should do. So that should be the higher end of the range, 0.8 to 1 gram per pound. Now, who would be above 1 gram per pound? That's super duper crazy aggressive. Like if somebody's training 5, 6, 7 days a week and they're beating the living crap out of themselves, like they have full 1.5 hour workouts devoted to singular body parts. Like I'm just going to do an hour and a half of legs. I'm going to do it twice a week as aggressive as I can. Well, okay, yeah, you probably need to have that protein up. You can go up to between 1 to 1.25 grams per pound of body weight. Okay? So I thought this was kind of a fun question. Thought it might be fun to kind of talk through the answers. Will eating more protein lead to more muscle? The answer is maybe. When would the answer be yes? If you have more muscle damage than you have incoming protein. So if you're inconsistent with your eating and your protein's only like 0.6, 0.7, 0.8 grams per pound, but you're in the gym all the time, well then you probably can eat more protein and you'll probably get more muscle for it. When would the answer be no? Is if you don't really do a lot of muscle damaging activity, if you start adding in more protein, you might accidentally increase your calories, which increases body fat, or you'll overly restrict your carbs and fats, which also leads to more body fat. Golly, not good, right? So hopefully this was helpful to know where you are and what your steps should be. Cool. So if you have any questions, any follow-up questions, you want to know anything else, just let me know. My email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. I'd be happy to make any kind of follow-up podcast to this. I appreciate you listening. I hope you heard some things that are interesting to you and helped you understand how to live a healthier and happier life based on your needs. Cool. So if you like today's podcast, the podcast in general, please consider sharing the podcast. The more people we share the podcast with, the more people can help. That's the whole point of it. So if it's been helpful to your life, make sure you share it so we can help others' lives as well. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast, which you can now do on our website. The podcast is well over $1,000 a year. I give an hour to it every day, so I really appreciate the financial support to help curb some of that expense. So thank you for those who do give to the podcast. It does make a big difference. You can consider giving at our website, www.brutalirongym.com. There's an option for a one-time donation, monthly donation, yearly donation. However you do it, I thank you that you do it. We all thank you, so we can keep this thing going. Also, if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let us know at our email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.